we are back. This is the MMA Takeover show on the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network and the SureDog Radio Network. I am the host. My name is Keith Shillan. I'm a writer for SureDog, Cage Side Press, and I'm the executive producer of the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network. This is a great week to be an MMA fan. We have this huge week of fights. We have UFC 251 going down at Yas Island in Abu Dhabi on Fight Island. There's 3 title fights, an absolute loaded lineup. I'll be talking about all of that in the second segment when I speak to my good buddy Davidson Baker of the MMA Power Hour at Fansided. But before I get to talk to Davidson about that, I want to just talk about the top 5 news topics going on in the world of MMA. Let's get to it. My number 5. Now, I'm going to say this right now. When I rank these number 5, I kind of talk about what people are talking about. I don't do it by order of importance. And I had a hard time placing where I would put this because when it comes to importance, this would be number 1. And out of respect, I almost put it number 1, but I decided to put it number 5 here. And the number 5 news story is, and this is coming from the last time I did a show. The number 5 news story is Abdulmanap Nurmagomedov. I hope I said his name correctly. The father of UFC lightweight champion Khabib Nurmagomedov. Tragically, he has passed away from getting the coronavirus, and sadly, he's passed away. This is not a political show. I'm not going to make a political stand. You can determine how you feel about the coronavirus, about the safety measures, or what you should and shouldn't do. Nothing I say here is going to change people's minds. But what I want to talk about is the implications in the MMA scene, particularly how this is going to affect the champion, Khabib Nurmagomedov. Khabib lives with his father. He's extremely close to his family. That Dagestani lifestyle is different that us Americans can really understand, or if you're from Europe or Canada or other places, we don't have the same lifestyle that the Dagestanis. They have a very close knit family. As far as I know, Khabib and all his family and cousins that they live with his father. Besides being a father, he is a mentor to Khabib. He is spiritually believed, but he's also the coach of Khabib. A lot of the Dagestani and other fighters came up through him, under his wing. He's done so much for that region of MMA. So it's going to not just affect Khabib, but it's going to affect a lot of these other fighters like Islam Makhachev. But I'm really worried how it's going to affect Khabib because Khabib is scheduled to have a fight in September against Justin Gaethje. That is just 2 months from now. We know that Khabib had to pull off from this fight with Tony Ferguson because he was stuck in Russia and he couldn't travel. He usually travels to America, holds his camp at American Kickboxing Academy under Javier Vasquez and Crazy Bob Cook and all those guys. He couldn't do that. And now he's going to stay in Russia, but he doesn't have, besides his father, which is tough, he doesn't have his head coach. A lot of fighters, have had experiences where their father has died heading into fights. I think about Mikey Kessa when he was on the Ultimate Fighter show. His father passed away. He actually left the show to go to the funeral and whatnot. He actually ended up winning that season. But to also have your coach at the same time, I mean, this is really hard. That is a fight that's already tough for Khabib. A really tough matchup. Probably his toughest fight of his career. And it's really interesting as we get closer and closer to see if Khabib seems different in press conferences and whatnot, and see if it changed him. So, like I said, guys, don't read too much of that. Put it at number 5. It easily could be number 1. I'm not saying that the other stories are more important than the life of Mr. Nurmagomedov. I'm not saying don't read into this. Moving on. My number 4 story of the week is Pedro Munoz has pulled out of his fight against Frankie Edgar. It was going to go down in just about a week from now, the July 15th card. It's actually a Wednesday card. He was supposed to fight, like I said, he's supposed to fight Frankie Edgar in the co-main event. A big matchup in the bantamweight division, especially beginning this is Frankie Edgar's long-awaited debut in the division. Pedro Munoz pulled out because he tested positive for the COVID-19. And if you noticed lately, a lot of fighters, and this a lot of it has to do with new testing and better testing, but a lot of fighters are testing positive for COVID-19. Gilbert Burns had to pull out at UFC 251. Just talking about that card that Pedro Munoz had to pull out. Marina Rodriguez had to pull out of that card. Anderson Dos Santos had to pull out of that card. So already we've had 3 fighters have to pull out of that card. It was rumored, or it was reported, that the UFC tried to find a replacement for Frankie Edgar. There was rumors that Ricky Simone, who's over in Abu Dhabi helping, I saw embedded, he was helping Paige Van Zandt get ready for her fight, that Ricky Simone was offered as an opponent for Frankie Edgar. Aljamain Sterling basically said that Merab Dvalishvili was offered to Frankie Edgar, and he was willing to travel over to take on Frankie Edgar. But the reports are that Frankie Edgar declined these fights. Frankie Edgar, I think he should have taken it. I don't think it made much sense to turn out. You're 38 years old. You are on a 2-fight losing streak. You've actually lost 3 out of your last 4. Your last 2 out of those 4 fights, you got knocked out twice. I think Frankie is not in the position at this point in his career to really pick and choose who he wants. I think you kind of take any fight they give you. Plus, I think stylistically, both guys who like to wrestle a lot. Frankie Edgar's a phenomenal wrestler. Like, he doesn't ever get out wrestled. I think they would have been a good stylistic matchup where he could really, in his, going to a new division, you want to get a win. You don't want to get a setback. You don't want to lose 3 in a row. I mean, when you're 38 years old, any loss crushes your career. I heard people say, well, what would he benefit by taking that fight? Well, first of all, he benefits just get paycheck. I mean, that's big at 38 years old. You got a couple fights left, get an extra paycheck. But also, like, people say, well, if he loses that fight to a lesser known game, like, he's done. If he loses any fight at this time, he's done. He's like I said, he's at the age, especially in the lower weight class, where you should have already be way past your prime of declining. But also, it would be, his 3rd loss in a row. It would not look good for Frankie Edgar. So, plus that's a loaded division. I mean, with Peter Yan and Jose Aldo fighting for the title right now. You have Aljamain Sterling on the sidelines. Cody Garbrandt's got a big win. Like, there's a line of guys way ahead of Frankie Edgar, which it doesn't mean like he took a fight and like he's not going to get a title fight. He was way behind the title fight picture anyways. That's why I think Frankie Edgar kind of dropped the ball. He should have took that fight. That said, I hope Pedro Munoz, I hope he's fine. I hope he gets healthy and everything works out for him. And all the other fighters that have tested positive for COVID-19. The number 3 story of the week is Glover Teixeira and Thiago Santos is booked for September 12th, an upcoming card. That's a fantastic fight, especially in a ranking sense. It could actually be a number 1 contender at light heavyweight. And what a story for both these guys. Like, let's take first Glover Teixeira. Glover Teixeira is 40 years old. And if he beats Thiago Santos, that would be his 5th win in a row in the division. It would probably catapult him to number 1 contender status, catapult him to a title fight. Like, when he started losing fights, when he lost like Corey Anderson, I don't think anybody pictured that as he got older, he actually would go on a run like this and ever be back in the, fighting for a title. While I don't think he beats Thiago Santos, if he does, what an incredible story. Now let's go to Thiago Santos, another incredible story. It was just a year ago he fought, hurt his knee, hopped around basically on one leg, and fought John Jones, and actually won. This is the thing that hasn't been brought up enough. He actually won a judge's scorecard. Like, he was, by one judge, believed he won. If another judge saw the same thing, Thiago Santos would have been champion of the world and beat John Jones, in my opinion, the greatest fighter of all time. He would have been the first guy to actually defeat John Jones. But he's coming back just over a year, completely, surgery, had to repair his entire knee. But I think it's so wise for these guys to get booked and get ahead, because right now there isn't a leading candidate. There's not really anybody that's booked against John Jones or anybody that seems like the consensus. I probably would lead with Jan Blachowicz because he hasn't faced John Jones. what the under contenders actually have, and John Jones has wins all of them. The other one, Dominic Ray, is a guy that first time I scored a fight against John Jones. I thought Dominic Ray was beating him, so he's an option. But then obviously the winner of Glover Teixeira, Thiago Santos, would be an option. So getting a win, keeping your name in the news, staying active, staying more active than Jan Blachowicz and Dominic Reyes would be would be huge for you to move up and get a chance. But let's not forget that John Jones is talking about retirement, talking about relinquishing the belt. He's upset with the pay. There could be a chance where John Jones is set on the sidelines and they do either an interim title shot or a vacant title shot. If that happens, the winner of this matchup would be a no-brainer to at least be, to be one side of that fight. So it makes a lot of sense in a ranking sense. Like I said, I favor Thiago Santos. Pre-tape study, it's not my prediction, just the first thing that jumped in my mind. But how incredible would a story would be if Glover Teixeira could keep this train rolling. Talking about a train, this is not a train rolling on tracks, but this is a train that has completely gone off the tracks, and that is Mike Perry. He's my number 2 story of the week. Earlier this week, there was a video that came out of a incident that happened in a Texas restaurant. Mike Perry got into it with somebody else. I don't know who this guy was to Mike Perry, but Mike Perry is seen punching looks like an elderly man. This is awful. This is terrible. And guys, don't be one of those guys on the internet, on Twitter, on Facebook, trying to justify this action, saying like, well, Mike Perry, he's justified in hitting him because the old man went after him. The old man, yeah, technically the old man did say, like Mike Perry said, I'll knock you out too, to the old man. The old man says something like, I'm not exactly what his words were, but something like, go ahead and do it, or go ahead and try, and then like kind of lunged at Mike Perry. You're a elite fighter. You are. Let me say this. I don't like Mike Perry. I don't like him. I have a personal beef. Him and his old training partner Alex Nicholson is just two guys that I think they're I don't think they're good human beings. I think that's justified by these videos. At least with Mike Perry, there's other issues I have with Alex Nicholson. But I'm going to set that aside. Mike Perry is an elite fighter. I say an elite athlete. Compared to a regular person, he's an elite fighter. I don't think he's an elite fighter in the UFC sense, but I mean, you're a professional fighter. Though he doesn't act professional, he gets paid to fight, and he fights at the highest organization. He's fought some of the best guys in the world, guys like Vicente Luque, Donald Cerrone, Jeff Neal. I mean, he's fought some really tough guys. Regardless if this old man went after him, you can't act like the way Mike Perry is. And I've said people say, oh, you come at me, you get hit. Well, that's why you're not a professional athlete. That's why you're not regarded as a professional. If you replace Mike Perry with other guys, let's talk about, say, Demetrius Johnson. Do you think Demetrius Johnson hits that old man? I don't. Do you think, say, Robert Whittaker? Do you think Robert Whittaker would have hit that old man? I do not believe Robert Whittaker. You want to talk about guys in the past? Do you think like Randy Couture would have hit that guy? I don't. So Mike Perry is an absolute wreck right now. I'm concerned for his mental health. You see all the incidents that led up before this. I mean, his absolute crazy interviews. His post-fight interview about taxes and not understanding he has to pay taxes. His pre-fight interviews with his last fight, talking about media members don't see him on the street, he'll attack you. Fans don't see him on the street, he'll attack you. His leaving a camp and have only his girlfriend and his cornerman. Like, this guy's doing some crazy stuff. His 2% black, so I can say the N-word and stuff like this. He just doesn't seem mentally stable. And if you are not mentally stable, you should not be fighting right now in the UFC. I actually think the UFC did the best they could in this situation because they've kind of set their back against the wall. They did put a statement out. They did not completely ignore the Mike Perry situation. Dana White took questions about the Mike Perry. He didn't say no comment or we're going to look into it. Or he actually answered. He spoke bluntly about his feelings towards Mike Perry. Mike Perry is got to get mental treatment and substance abuse treatment. Obviously, I applaud him. Like I said, I don't like Mike Perry, but I applaud anybody who's going to try to get help for themselves, to better themselves. I think it's obviously needed. I think it's good that the UFC is pushing it. I love that the UFC has said that Mike Perry will not get a fight again in the UFC. Until he can show signs that he has recovered from this, that he has got the help he needs. Now, a lot of people on Twitter and Facebook have said the UFC should have fired Mike Perry, and I agree with that. But based on the precedents they have set, how they've treated other fighters, they would have probably stepped in a hornet's nest, or made it even worse by firing Mike Perry or cutting Mike Perry, releasing Mike Perry. Because let's face it, Conor McGregor did the same thing. Conor McGregor punched an old man at a bar and they didn't cut him. Now, first thing you say, oh, Keith, come on, obviously he's not Conor McGregor. Absolutely, I understand that. Conor McGregor is getting a bigger leash than other fighters are going to get. Absolutely, I understand it, and honestly, it's not justified, but it's definitely understood. I mean, when your biggest star, by far your biggest star, your biggest money generator, does something, you're not just going to release him and let him go to a rival because Conor McGregor was swooped up in an instant. And that, but what I'm saying about Mike Perry, like why they've kind of forced themselves, is because if Mike Perry got cut and they announced it, a lot of the questioning this weekend about UFC 251 would not be about these fantastic fights, these title fights, and all this. The question would be like, Mike Perry was cut from the UFC, Conor McGregor did something similar, why don't you cut him? Twitter would be talking about that. Some of the media members that are there probably wouldn't, but if they ever had an open one again and you had other outlets out there, guys, I think someone would have asked about this, and I just think they would have made the controversy a little bit longer. Well, I don't think it was the best move. I think fighters need to be punished to make a statement, say you're not going to give him any fights until he seeks mental health and seeks substance abuse and gets through this. I think that's the best they could do, kind of make lemonade when you have lemons kind of thing. All right, but now to my number one story of the week. How could it be anything else? Since the last time I did a show, we were talking about Gilbert Burns getting a title shot. Gilbert Burns is out because of COVID-19, and on 6 days' notice, Jorge Masvidal is in to fight Kamaru Usman. This is incredible news. When Gilbert Burns pulled out, I believe it was late Friday night, I found out, the day before the 4th of July, during the 4th of July, I had some things going on with family, and I was trying to focus on that, and then there's rumors that Jorge Masvidal is going to step up, and I'm just ignoring Twitter, I'm ignoring SureDog and these things, because I'm not and I shouldn't say Holy York. I'm not saying I'm ignoring SureDog because they don't SureDog because they don't put out fake news. What I'm saying is just, Jorge Masvidal says he wants to do this. I didn't believe Jorge Masvidal, basically, because a lot of guys will say they want to take a fight, they'll step up, but when it's actually offered, or they'll say, things didn't work out because of money, that. Plus, we know that right before this, Jorge Masvidal, there was reports of how far away the UFC tried booking Jorge Masvidal against Kamaru Usman, but they couldn't get the price right. Well, apparently he got the price right, and he stepped up. And I just want to sit back, and I did it on the roundtable. I'm not going to do it again, but I just want to talk about this time. 15 months ago, Jorge Masvidal was on a 2-fight losing streak, was brought in to face Darren Till. Now, I went, like I said on the roundtable, I went step by step through all the things he's faced and all the things that have happened crazily in the life of Jorge Masvidal since that moment 15 months ago. But I just want to say, from that moment when he got in to lose to Darren Till, fast forward 15 months later, and he's fighting on Fight Island on 6 days' notice. This guy is already a star, but and I think that's proof by just, I don't know about you guys. Obviously, if you're listening to this, you're a hardcore fan. The amount of casual MMA fans that have reached out to me, asking me about bets, asking me about this matchup, where are you watching this, are you getting to your house, blah, 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 blah. I can't believe how many people right now are talking about this matchup with Jorge Masvidal. They weren't doing that with Gilbert Burns. But now let me ask this question. Imagine if he wins. Now, he's a big underdog. A lot of people think he deserves to be underdog. But what if he wins? Well, first of all, he accomplishes this incredible dream. Jorge Masvidal has been in the fight game for a really long time. And to become a champion this late in your career is astonishing. But let's go back a little further. Jorge Masvidal was a guy, he was street fighting in Miami. That's how we were known. He was fighting in the backyards. I mean, this isn't Kimbo Slice who, got his name on YouTube, got it, moved over to MMA, got some, beat up Tank at it and stuff, and then at the end of the day showed he couldn't fight. No, Jorge Masvidal did the opposite. Jorge Masvidal proved he could fight, and he took the long road, fought on the regional scene, fought in Strikeforce, fought in the undercard of the prelims, and then slowly just kind of, worked his way, had the chips fall the right way, and he's in the situation. But if you think he's a star now, if he starches Kamaru Usman, say first round, second round of this fight, he will become probably, in my opinion, the number 2 star in MMA if he's not already, but the number 2 star between next to Conor McGregor. And what I want to say about that is, I think the gap between Jorge Masvidal and Conor McGregor may become closer than the gap between Jorge Masvidal and insert whoever you think the third biggest star in the UFC and MMA is. He is the guy that the Latino community, the MMA community, is looking for, the Latino star. They don't have one. He will be that one. He's already all over ESPN, but I could see a major sponsorship like Nike or Gatorade or something like that. He could be on Wheaties. Who knows? People are so excited for this matchup and seeing him. And the best thing about this for him, he's got nothing to lose. He's taking this fight on 6 days' notice. If he loses, how many people would say, well, he took it on 6 days' notice. He had to cut 22 pounds. It'll be absolute crazy and mania if he can win. But he also has that, trump card in the back, like a hall pass, the pass that says, hey, he wasn't supposed to win. He took it on 6 days' notice against absolute killer like Kamaru Usman. Anyways, guys, that is your top 5 news stories of the week. All right, guys, those are my thoughts of all the news that was happening this week. Now it's my time to bring in a guest, the guest of the week, get all of his opinions on everything that's going on this weekend at UFC 251 Fight Island. He is a guy that if you listen to the Loudmouth MMA podcast, you should be very familiar with him, as he has done pretty much either has hosted the show, co-hosted the show, been a guest on the show. He's done everything. We go way back all the way to the MMA Takeover days. He is a writer for Fansided and the MMA Power Hour with my good friend Colin Crandall. And I think he's becoming a dad, if that's correct. He is, of course,
not
Davidson
correct.
Baker. Hold on. Hold on a second. I saw the news that Ariane, I'm messing this joke up. Ariane Celeste is pregnant. That you're telling me that's not yours?
I mean, I didn't want to come out on a public platform and make it known. However, I mean, I just need to figure out how I'm going to, break the news to my, slide thing that's fighting on the very first fight of the main card this weekend, Miss Amanda. I don't know how I'm going to keep that from her, but Amanda yes, lots of secrets that I'm going to have to keep very close and tight.
Yeah, if you're into Amanda Hebas, you got to watch out for Big Marcel Dorff, because he's a big Amanda Hebas fan. It's funny that everyone's giving Amanda Hebas a lot of love when she's not even the hottest girl in that same fight.
Right, and you see, I'm trying to take the road away from the conventional. You know what I'm saying? Everybody loves themselves some PVZ in the MMA squares, whether she's going to be wearing UFC or Bellator platted gloves in her next fight.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about it. UFC 251 going down this Saturday at Fight Island in Yas, Abu Dhabi. So let's get right into it. How excited are you for Fight Island?
Very excited, and the trio of title fights atop the bill obviously is a solid saturation for said excitement. It's a tremendous card. Some of the billing and some of people's opinions have even gone as far as saying like the main card is good, and then the rest of the card you could throw out. I could not vehemently disagree with that notion even more. I think this card from top to bottom is so juicy in a lot of areas. Obviously, though, the main card being where all the attention is going to be paid to, and rightfully so. I mean, what else do you have to say? There's only been, I think, a dozen or less times in UFC history where you have a trio of title fights atop the itinerary. There's not a whole lot more you could ask for in this situation, maybe outside of, I don't know, fans in the seats, dollars and cents in that gate number. But outside of that, you've got just about everything you need here on this fight card.
Yeah. It's funny, the whole gimmick of going over to an island. Like, I'm not into the gimmick. Like, I could care less.
Right.
But it seems like a lot of people are really digging into the Fight Island thing. You keep seeing the pictures of the island and the pictures of the octagon right next to the beach and stuff. Like, I don't really care. Like, they could fight anywhere and I'm going to watch. It seems like a lot of people are into that. But one reason why this card is going to be getting so much attention and has been getting so much attention this week is it's not often where a main event gets canceled the week of the fight and the replacement comes in and he's a bigger star than the guy he's replacing. It's a more exciting matchup, at least to the casual fans. And that obviously what I'm referring to is Jorge Masvidal, Mr. Game Brand himself, Street Jesus, replacing Gilbert Burns. Gilbert Burns tested positive for COVID-19. Of course, he had to be replaced. And I think it was Friday night we found out that Gilbert Burns was out. It was late Friday night. Gilbert Burns was out.
Yeah.
I heard, like it is in the MMA world, everyone's messaging, oh, I'll jump in. Colby Covington said it. And obviously Jorge Masvidal said it. I was actually messaging people and saying, hey, you know what? It's not the best scenario, but you got two welterweights in Zaleski.
I saw that.
And Salikov on the co-main event. I said, give one of those guys, like, hey, you're not going to win, but hey, we're throwing you to the main event. Or I said, put him against Usman and drop him third down, sliding the co-main event and the co-main event up. But I don't know how this
too
works.
Insane.
Yeah, I don't know.
Zaleski was ranked not too long ago.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. But never in my wildest dreams did I think you'd get one of probably a top 5 most marketable fighters in the UFC, if not higher, to come in on short notice and take on Kamaru Usman. So I was listening to Ariel Helwani. That's why it was on my mind. I almost called Ariane Celeste Ariel Helwani, which you might be having a baby with him too. Ariel Helwani and Daniel Cormier was talking on their show, and Ariel Helwani said that he thinks adding Masvidal, even with this short kind of marketing space, that alone is going to add. And he said 500,000, 500,000 pay-per-view buys.
I heard that.
Daniel Cormier went with a much lower number. I can't remember what he said. I think he said somewhere between.
I think he said 200 and 300.
Either way, very significant. So let me ask you this question. I agree with Ariel. Like, I think it's good. I'm getting messages already. I'm getting messages from friends that were asking me about the fights, this and that. Mm-hmm. And they weren't asking me 2 days ago about Gilbert Burns, but they're asking me about Jorge Masvidal. So, I mean, is 500,000, is that really that crazy? Can he add that much?
I think it's a little bit ambitious. You saw, from our point of view with us seeing each other on this recording, that I was taken away when you said it because I also heard that recording and my eyes popped out of my head while I was driving and I heard that. I think 500,000. Oh, that's a lot of pay-per-view buys, man. Like, just for one person to plug in and just shoot it to the moon. I'll throw this hypothetical back at you just to kind of use it as a contrasting point. Whether or not it's like something you can compare it to, because it's two completely different situations. However, same scenario. Dos Anjos is out. Diaz goes in. I'm trying to ballpark what pay-per-view how many pay-per-views that card sold. Do you remember?
No, it was over 1 million.
196.
It was over 1 million. And
how many?
Yeah.
How many does it sell if Dos Anjos ends up headlining it? And there's no they might talk back and forth, Conor and Dos Anjos, to continue to hype it up. Sure. But if Diaz doesn't step in, what does that do to that pay-per-view?
I don't think it would have had as big of an impact, you think, because Conor was at that peak already. He already knocked out Jose Aldo at that time. He was at the peak of his popularity. So the higher you go up in sales, the harder it is to get a gap. Like, chances are you're going to buy anyways. Now, the excitement level, you might be more excited to see Nate Diaz, but I still think roughly the same amount of people are going to buy the pay-per-view.
Right.
In this case,
Usman doesn't bring what Conor brought, which is why, I mean, I think that Masvidal does. I think he really does bring 500,000 pay-per-view buys. I said it in the last segment already. I think it was a good estimate. I think he's that popular. We'll get to that, like how popular he is right now, but we'll get to that in a second. But give me a number. What do you think the pay-per-view, when this is all over, what do you think the pay-per-view buy numbers will be?
All right,
guys. Sorry about that. So it's going to sound really weird on the recording. We just got disconnected on Skype. It happens sometimes. We're back. Basically, I was saying that I actually agree that I think that Jorge Masvidal, the pay-per-view buys, I think he is going to add 500,000. I really think it might even be more than that. So, UFC 249. Tony Ferguson, Justin Gaethje did extremely well. It did over 700 pay-per-view buys, which is a very good number for those two guys. I didn't expect it that much, but they had no other sports going on. It was the first major sporting event, not counting, smaller. It was that, It was UFC 249.
It was really the breaking down of the barrier back into. I mean, definitely nothing close to normalcy, but like definitely the first. Live, definitely the first thing.
They had that, but I think, the media attention that they got helped. But there's no other sports going on right now. I mean, baseball's still not back yet. Football, obviously, you got signings, you got the Patrick Mahomes contract and all that stuff, but still you don't have live sports. So what is your prediction? If UFC 249 did 700K, what do you think this card will do?
Man, I mean,
I think it's going to break 1 million. I really
think it's going to be damn close. I think it's going to be damn close. And, that 500,000 number that we keep pegging as the addition of Jorge Masvidal can suggest, if it doesn't hit 500K as a result of adding Jorge, I think, like I said, I think 500K is just a tad ambitious personally, in my opinion. I think, though, like right underneath in between that 400 to 500K, would not be something that shocked me at all. As far as total pay-per-view buys, I fully I fully expect that it eclipses 249. I think it will get right around that 900K. Don't know.
All right.
If I'm willing to give it the million, though.
All right. You're saying 900. I'm going to think about this for a second. They were going from Kamaru Usman versus Gilbert Burns, who just a couple weeks ago you had other fighters actually complaining, like Gilbert Burns, people like, I think hardcore fans were excited about that, but nobody was like, falling over with the announcement. Now Jorge Masvidal comes in, people are going crazy. I mean, what a turnaround! I want to talk. So let's do this. You said 900K pay-per-view buys, and that was with 6 days' notice is when it became official. If it had 6 weeks, would it have made over 1 million?
I think it would have been right there. Yeah. I think obviously with that whole package that you can offload 6 weeks is a lot of time to shove something down, a casual MMA fan's throat, especially when a name as noticeable as Jorge Masvidal's is involved. I think, that 6 week kind of period would have definitely helped give it that little push. But even so, that kind of late lightning in a bottle effect. Masvidal takes the fight. I mean, where is he? Within 24 hours, he's on First Take with, seemingly his best buddies in the world, Stephen A. Smith and Dominique Foxworth. Burns, while obviously, as you indicated, the hardcores are all in on Burns, and we're all in his corner, obviously, for being a rightful number one contender, and rightfully so. He earned that. We all watched that with our own eyes. However, I'm not sure, based on popularity alone, that if the roles were reversed, he's on a Skype conversation with Stephen A. Foxworthy the morning after he takes the call. And that just has to do with the popularity of this conversation. And Jorge Masvidal does fit that bill. He does have a seat at that table. So therefore, all of a sudden, like I said, lightning in a bottle, as we've seen time and time again in the past with the UFC hitting right when we least expect it, it's going to create something that'll make a pretty penny for the UFC as far as pay-per-view buys are concerned. And I think that they are – I don't know how you couldn't be happy with it, or how you couldn't have paid Jorge at least close to what he was asking for in order to make this possible.
Yeah, you made a good point about if Jorge Masvidal was the original opponent and something happened to him and he was replaced by Gilbert Burns, I don't want to say it would have that UFC, what was it, 223 where Ally Quinton moved in.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have that feel, but it would be something similar where, a lot of people would be very disappointed. It wouldn't be a guy that really sold. Now, Ally Quinton didn't really deserve to fight for the title, but Gilbert Burns kind of does. So I don't want to say it's like a perfect comparison, but I think it's a fair enough comparison. I think that would have been devastating. So I want to talk about Jorge Masvidal because I keep having a hard time grasping how much this guy gets over because a part of me, he's like this new shiny toy. He's like the new kid on the block. There's so many people, and I'm like, this is Jorge Masvidal. Like, he's been around forever. Like, I remember him fighting in Strikeforce in Strikeforce. So when he came over, I remember people were excited that he came to the UFC, but it was more like, oh, look, this like veteran. It was like, to me, like when Jorge Masvidal came to the UFC, I felt the same way I felt when like Tanya Everidge came to the UFC. Like, yeah, she's pretty good, like close to top 10. But it was more like an accomplishment, like, oh, cool, like that person who makes it to the UFC, they can call themselves a UFC veteran for the rest of their life. Like, that's how I felt about Jorge Masvidal. I always say, yeah, pretty talented, probably a little underrated. I remember when he got his first main event, it was against Benson Henderson. I think it was a terrible fight. I think he lost a split decision. It was somewhere in Asia. It was like in the middle of the daytime. But people were excited to see Jorge Masvidal in that situation. But I want to go back 16 months ago, March 2019. I want to say, and my question I want to ask you is, has anybody had a better run in MMA history than Jorge Masvidal had in the last 16 months? And I'm going to say that with a pause, saying if he beats Kamaru Usman. So I want to lay the timeline out for a second before you answer my question. He was on a 2-fight losing streak. Right? He lost to Damian Maia. He lost to Stephen Thompson. He gets brought in after being out for a long time. He gets brought in. He goes over to London. He's got a main event. He goes to London to face Darren Till. So go back to that time. He's getting brought in. He's getting brought in to lose. He's supposed to be the rebound fight for Darren Till, who they put all the eggs in Darren Till basket, which Tyron Woodley took him out very easily in his title fight. Remember, Darren Till skipped the line over a bunch of other guys they thought should have deserved a title shot. He skips the line. He's supposed to come in. He gets a knockout in the first. Was it first or second round? I can't remember. First or second round. Second round. He got his knockout in the second round in the main event. Huge moment for him. But that wasn't even the biggest moment of the night. Something that people get glanced over. That's not what made him the star. Because we see guys get win knockout. It was suddenly him getting in a confrontation with Leon Edwards where he assaulted Leon Edwards. Everyone always forgets that part. Like, he assaulted Leon Edwards.
Very much so assaulted him.
Like, could have got arrested. I mean, there was actually rumors that he was going to get arrested in London. Blah, blah, blah.
Could have, definitely.
Then not only does he do that, he does this interview with Brock Nakamoto like immediately after. So like it was like people were waiting to see the film of the assault. They see it, and immediately after, 10 minutes later, there's an interview with Brock Nakamoto where he's saying, so I gave him the 3-piece with the soda, which went crazy. Suddenly, everyone loved him. Oh, this guy's a true street guy. Everyone started loving him. He's a real fighter. But then he gets matched up, not with Leon Edwards, who a lot of people were calling for. He got matched up with Ben Askren, which was a little bit of a head scratcher because people were like, he's got the beef with Leon Edwards at the time. He gets matched with Ben Askren, and then Ben Askren's running his mouth. Ben Askren's doing what he does best, hyping this fight up to the point when it becomes International Fight Week. It was a fight where John Jones fought on the card. The first time John Jones lost lost a scorecard in his career. While this happens, it's Ben Askren and Jorge Masvidal that's getting all the attention.
It's background noise.
I think, wasn't that the same card Amanda Nunes high kicked Holly Holm?
Holly Holm.
Yep. So Amanda Nunes, the GOAT, high kicks Holly Holm into oblivion. John Jones actually loses a scorecard to Thiago Santos. But everyone's talking about Jorge Masvidal and Ben Askren up to that point. And then what happens? This is the biggest moment he has. International Fight Week. He lands a flying knee knockout in 5 seconds. Some people put it as the greatest knockout in MMA history. It's the fastest knockout in UFC history. He follows that up by getting a match against Nate Diaz, who Nate Diaz called him out. They did this whole gimmick with the what was it, baddest MF belt, what the heck it was called?
The BMF belt.
The BMF belt. They put him up against Nate Diaz. It was New York City, right? It was in New York City.
Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, Madison Square. So now he goes from third to the bottom to headline in Madison Square Garden against Nate Diaz. They get a new belt. They add The Rock. The Rock puts it on him. He bashes up Nate Diaz. Then he follows that up by taking on Kamaru Usman on 6 days' notice on Fight Island. And then now imagine if he actually wins. And then he gets the title. So all that together, going from a 2-fight losing streak to all of that stuff happening, would any fighter in MMA history have a better 15-month run than Jorge Masvidal?
There's one name that sticks out in my head like a sore thumb, even though I would have to fact check the actual chronological timeline and make sure it was 15 months because I'm not sure if it was. And ironically enough, if you keep your ears open and listen closely to the chatter around the MMA media grapevine throughout the week, you'll hear this comparison kind of echoed throughout. And it's weird because these two dudes hated each other's guts for a while at one point. I keep thinking Michael Bisping when you mention everything from, venerable, tough, gritty, I don't want to say journeyman up until, he went on this run. But his record, without looking at it and without going into the further context and watching film or whatever, knowing anything about Jorge Masvidal, you just look at the record and you could instantly point to journeyman being as the adjective that comes out of your head without knowing any better. Bisping's the same way. Bisping's track record through the UFC, probably a little bit lengthier. Obviously, you had The Ultimate Fighter. Obviously, was a little bit earlier. But these situations, though, like I said, it just rings a bell in a bit in my head. I might need to fact check myself as far as the timeline is concerned, but this is also a kind of a pointless and random fact to point out. This is Jorge Masvidal's first time fighting for a title, for a considered world title in over 8.5 years. He fought for the Strikeforce lightweight title against Gilbert Melendez way back in the day. So, this has been kind of like an up and back. I wouldn't even say down. I mean, he had his literal ups and downs like pretty much every fighter does, or almost every fighter does. However, when you ask that question, again, the one name just continues to stick out in my head, and that is, I'm going to fact check my timeline though right now to see if it was 15 months. Whenever Bisping went from Silva,
like his title reign, yeah, his Silva, and then Rockhold, and then Henderson.
Yeah, but that's not as impressive as.
But the Henderson was the reason why Henderson was a big deal was getting back the worst loss of his career, like avenging that loss. Obviously, Anderson Silva being the middleweight in that weight class. Obviously, Rockhold avenging a loss and winning the title. It was a great run. The only reason why I think Masvidal's was bigger was the fact that Masvidal was a bigger star off of this. Like, Bisping was a star in the MMA world. Masvidal is becoming a star outside of the MMA world. The other guy that obviously came to mind was Conor McGregor. Obviously, Conor McGregor's run between Chad Mendes to Eddie Alvarez is a little over 15 months. But he did have the Nate Diaz loss in it. Like, Masvidal wouldn't have had the loss. He would have checkmarked everything. Maybe Brock Lesnar, maybe Ronda Rousey. But either way, if you want to put him in Brock Lesnar, Ronda Rousey, Conor McGregor, if you want to see he had those kind of 15-month runs, that's like the best group you could possibly be in as far as star power goes. And this is the guy that was, kind of a journeyman. I mean, to be in this situation is absolutely incredible. So let me ask you this question. So I don't think enough people are giving Kamaru Usman credit for Kamaru Usman to basically change from fighting a former teammate, a guy, or actually really a current teammate, a guy that there was no bad blood, it was just competitiveness in Gilbert Burns, to a guy that they almost got in a fight in, I don't know, what was it, it
was on Radio Row,
the Super Bowl, right?
Yeah, that's another good point.
There's another one thing. He got in a fight.
That's another good point that we completely flew over.
That's how crazy.
They put those guys there.
Think about
that wasn't a coincidence.
Think about how crazy is this. He had such a good year when the freaking Super Bowl, the biggest sporting event in the U.S., is going on. they got a little bit of the pie of the Super Bowl attention. Like, that's how crazy of a year for her, especially Jorge Masvidal. But, Usman, with obviously a good one, win the title, beat the rival in Colby Covington, and then getting this matchup. But I don't think there's enough credit for Kamaru Usman to take in this fight and change it. But let me ask you this question. Besides the bigger thing, and I think I've heard a lot of people say all the pressure's on Usman, and I kind of agree with it, because if Masvidal loses, you're going to get that, well, he took it on 6 days' notice. If he wins, that narrative is through the roof. So I think I agree with that I want to say all the pressure's on Usman, but the large majority is. But so taking out the star power of this, let's just talk in X's and O's. Is Jorge Masvidal a tougher matchup than Gilbert Burns would have been for Kamaru Usman?
I don't believe so. Personally, I don't believe so. I think there are intricacies in Jorge's game, particularly positionally, that make him tricky for Kamaru for sure. I mean, we're talking about Jorge Masvidal. He's going to be tricky for anyone weighing 155 or 170 in the world at this point. However, man, you got to look at all the things that make Gilbert Burns who he is, and all the things that make Gilbert Burns as dangerous as he is. You want to go down to the ground, you'd be hard pressed to find, an amount of names that you can list on one hand that you would be willing to go on a canvas endeavor with as far as grappling is concerned. There are probably less than 5 names on your hand that you would least rather be in there with as a welterweight than Gilbert Burns. And that's not even to begin to mention how he's improved on the feet. From his UFC debut to now, his improvement on the feet has been absolutely tremendous. He's really found where to focus his power, and we've seen that in knockouts. Jason Sago, Dan Moret, what have you. But still, I mean, he's putting high-level guys out cold. I think
Damien Maia.
With the little – yes, Damien, pretty much. And
he absolutely destroyed Tyron Woodley for 25 minutes, almost put him out in the first round.
Yeah, totally. When you take everything tit for tat and you talk, like you said, X's and O's, it's hard for me to put Masvidal as a tougher matchup here just because of the ground aspect. And Masvidal, where I find this fight stylistically intriguing, like I said, are in those close quarters. And I think that's where Usman has to be really careful, because that's where Masvidal could have something up his sleeve. If something isn't, if the distance isn't ideal for Kamaru to set up anything, let alone, draw himself away from Masvidal's firing range, that's dangerous territory. That's very dangerous territory. I don't know personally going into it if I feel like Usman's going to blast double leg the whole time, or if he's going to who knows? I think that would be the conventional safest path to victory, though, right? Like to go a grapple heavy approach.
Yeah, no, I definitely would think that would be the not only the smart route. I think it's going to be the likely route. Is
right.
We've seen Usman willing to go out wrestling against people that he thinks he has advantage. One thing that stands out to me is the comments Dustin Poirier mentioned on an interview recently. He talked about that he's been training with Masvidal for weeks now. That Masvidal has pretty much been in a camp mode, that he had Usman on his mount and kind of expected to get a chance to get Usman, and that this might not be might be officially be a 6 days notice, but he's been training 6 weeks, and he said he was part of Poirier's camp. For Poirier obviously just fought Daniel Hooker, and then there's stories about he brought in all these high level wrestlers to work with. He brought in Penn State national champions and Bo Nickel and Anthony Cassar, and I mean these are multiple. Bo Nickel's a 3-time NCAA champion. I think Cassar is like a 2-time champion.
I'm glad you brought up Bo Nickel too. I guess Bo Nickel is currently, if they're doing their quarantine or whatever, I think they'd still be confined within quarantine, Masvidal and Usman. If what I heard was correctly, Bo Nickel should be sitting in that room quarantining with Masvidal right now as we speak. He's got Nickel over there. Nickel is cornering him.
I want people to understand I know you follow wrestling. I love wrestling. I love the NCAA wrestling. I want to tell you how good these guys are. Like Bo Nickel, obviously we didn't get to finish this past season because of COVID. But the year before, Bo Nickel is the reigning Hodge Trophy winner. Yep, that is the wrestling's Heisman. So basically he is the best wrestler of the year. He won it 3 times. He was he's amazing. And both these guys were training to make the Olympics. Like that's how good these guys are. That said, you bring in all the top wrestlers in the world, you can get freaking Jordan Burroughs, and then you can get Gail Sanderson. You can get whatever you want. He's not making up the gap between him and Kamaru Usman. It's not happening. Like I don't care. No. Not yet. I mean, we keep working with those guys for a long time, but that's not gonna happen. The other thing I want to ask you about is Jorge Masvidal said that he weighed 190. He might be playing a little games. There was pictures of him eating pizza. He might be playing a little games, but he said he weighed 190 as of this week. He had to cut 20 pounds. Obviously, there's a time change, being that they're in Abu Dhabi. They're both fighting. It's going to be like 8 o'clock in the morning local time there. That affects both of them, so I don't think either guy gets an advantage. But Masvidal has the weight thing. Also, it came out just today that his head coach, Mike Brown, has COVID, positive COVID, and he cannot coach him. So does any of these factors, the weight cut, the coaches, any of these things you think makes you less confident in wanting to pick Jorge Masvidal?
I mean, I'm not very confident at all, given even perfect circumstances, in picking Jorge Masvidal. But yes, absolutely. If all my eggs are in a Jorge Masvidal embedded basket, yes, I'd all of the coinciding factors that you just listed, not even to mention just the sheer fact alone that you have got to be standing across a locked cage from Kamaru Usman, that being a big enough problem in and of itself. And everything you just highlighted, again, throws more fuel into the fire. However, I don't want to get into the whole contrasting whether this guy would be better suited for this situation than said guy. But having said that, I would say if there are a handful of guys on the UFC roster, and Masvidal has gone on the record and indicated this himself numerous times, if there are a handful of guys that I can count on, maybe not necessarily to pull me guaranteed results, but to be just about, if not at their best, when everything is chaotic and nothing is really normal, I would say Jorge Masvidal fits that billing pretty well.
Yeah, I mean, just the experience alone, the amount of matches he had to get, the second most matches in history before a UFC title fight, other than the only guy who had more was Alistair Overeem. That helps. I mean, go back to his street fighting days. There was no weighings, there was no coaches. He was fighting guys. He knew about fighting guys out of different weight classes. That thing
kind of all used to be like uncoordinated chaos. You know what I'm saying? Like this is where he's been. This is what he's done. He's been here before.
Yeah, and I think this all goes back to that being the BMF. I mean, we joke about the BMF title, but there's a lifestyle that goes with that. And Jorge Masvidal, it's true. I mean, he's a tough kid. I mean, this is a kid from the streets. This guy who grew up street fighting in Miami. I want to move on to the co-main event because we don't have that much time, and we could probably continue to dissect this fight. And I do want to talk about these other 2 title fights before I let you go. Max Holloway is getting his rematch against Alex Volkanovski. Both guys, their last fights were with each other, where Alex Volkanovski pulled off a pretty big upset at the time. Now he's actually the 2-1 favorite. My first question to you is about this fight is, do you think Max Holloway deserved to be the next guy? Did you think he deserved the automatic rematch? Or if you were the matchmaker, would you have gone with somebody else?
This is a tricky kind of question to navigate around because there are caveats into why I do believe, yes, that Max does fit this particular situation just fine when maybe others in his given situation would not. For example, At featherweight right now, we have two pretty big fights as far as the upper tier of the ladder is concerned that if they're not scheduled, they're looking pretty likely to be scheduled for the next few months. Those fights being Korean Zombie and Ortega and Zabit and Yair. And with obviously the nature of those two fights getting ready to be in a holding pattern, there's got to be a guy sitting at that number one contender seat. And obviously, if you have four guys that are all going to be kind of independently vying for that next number one contender to be spot going down the line, it would make all the sense in the world if a rematch were to be made between two guys where, yes, the one that did lose the first fight is for some people's money. And I know that this is as rampant and violent an argument that MMA social media comes across for some reason, but some people call Max the greatest featherweight of all time.
Stop it.
Yeah, some people do though.
He's not the greatest featherweight on this card. Okay, continue.
But see what I mean though, like there is a guy in that seat that there has a case to be had for him, whether you and I disagree with it or agree with it or not.
Joe Rogan is making, but somehow Joe Rogan, if he says it, he speaks for everyone because he keeps saying the consensus feather. Isn't that
weird?
What consensus? That's the minority. We put a poll on and then everyone on Twitter vote. Max would be the minority to Jose Aldo, but I don't want to go down that road.
I'm glad you said that though, because it is true.
I don't think Joe understands what the word consensus means. Consensus does not even mean majority. It means like, all right, here's a contract. Okay, here's ready. The consensus greatest wide receiver of all time is Jerry Rice. The consensus greatest quarterback of all time is Tom Brady. Consensus greatest hockey player is Wayne Gretzky, whatever, like swimmer, Michael Phelps, whatever. Go ahead, carry on.
Right. And of course, all great points. And Max being in the seat that he was in, and obviously timing helping him out a little bit in that aspect, was something Volk even touched on a little bit, And I gotta say, even though it's not particularly pertaining to the question, I gotta say, I love Volkanovski's attitude. I don't know if you heard his media day, dude. I don't know, I would assume
he has a champion.
If you haven't heard it, you're going to hear it.
Do you remember as soon as he said? He said he threw out as soon as he won the belt. Because I just did film study and I wanted to watch what he said, and I actually forgot what he said. As soon as he won the belt, he said Max Holloway. I'm paraphrasing. Basically, Max Holloway was an absolute amazing champion. The champion before him was Jose Aldo. They were the only, he forgot about Conor, but basically said these are the two champions. They both were great champions, and I am going to be like them. I'm going to be a great champion. I'm going to hold myself the same way they did. And he hasn't yet defended the belt yet, but I get what you're saying. His attitude, he has a great attitude. Carry on.
When they even asked him today about potential, and I mean, dude, dear God, these questions being lofted in this particular situation and on this particular week, a little bit early, being that he still has Max to deal with, but there were questions lofted at him about, potential champ possibilities.
Yeah, stupid questions. He hasn't even defended the belt yet. Stop.
Absolutely. And an answer that I immediately gravitated to and was like, yes, I love that attitude, had nothing to do with him going up. It had everything to do with what would you do if Henry Cejudo was offered to you? Well, he said, I want to make more money, not because of a strictly money issue, but because of the fact he's cutting the line. He's cutting the line of all these other guys. Basically, the point I'm trying to get to is Volkanovski's attitude as a featherweight champion right now and potentially going forward is the attitude that, MMA hardcores and traditionalists are going to love to see. And Volkanovski, if he's able to beat Max a second time this week, obviously the question is, where does Max go from here? I don't think there's any answer to that question that does not involve him going up north 10 pounds.
Yeah,
so I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unwrap there. You said a lot of things that really jumped out to me. First of all, I don't like immediate rematches. That's why I would have liked them to go with somebody else. You mentioned that Yair Rodriguez and Zabit and Ortega and all these guys are booked. Well, the reason why they're booked is because they gave the title fight to Holloway. So then they kind of everyone had to fall in place. I would have liked them to gone with one of the guys you said, any of them really. If you want me to put me on the spot and say who would I have given the title shot, it wouldn't be as popular. But you said Zabit, you said Korean Zombie, you said Yair. Okay, so you get those three. All three would be great opponents for Alex Volkanovski. Well, I would have given it to Yair for the simple reason is
really
of the three guys you mentioned, all three are contenders. All three have an opportunity to fight for the title, but Yair is the only one who has a win over any of the other two. He has a win over the Korean Zombie. So right. That's why I would have went with Yair. But I'm okay with the Holloway getting an immediate rematch. I just like building the suspense of the rematch a little bit. I don't like the immediate. I like, let them get a couple wins. Let someone who just lost. Like, imagine if Max Holloway came back, you put him against the beat, and he does a classic Max Holloway performance like he did to Brian Ortega. He does that to Zabit. Now think about and Volkanovski runs through Yair. Imagine or Korean Zombie, whoever you want to put in there. Imagine the hype of that. Like, whoa, Holloway hasn't lost a step. Look what he just saw. Now that's a bigger fight than the immediate rematch. But you know what this rematch reminds me of? And you said about if Volkanovski can beat him again. It reminds me a lot of a fighter we're going to see on the same card. Rose Namajunas' second fight against Joanna Jędrzejczyk. When she beat Joanna a second time, then everyone accepted her as a champion. They didn't see her as a fluke. Even as Rose Namajunas' second fight against Joanna, I was there in attendance. It felt like Joanna was the champion, and it was Rose's had to prove that she was on that level. I feel like Alex Volkanovski, even as he's the favorite in this fight, and it's a significant favorite, he's still a lot of was it a fluke? Was Holloway cutting too much weight? Did he have too much stuff? Was he focused? All the questions are on Holloway, not necessarily Volkanovski's skills.
And one thing I'll add on to even piggyback on top of that, look at the way the first fight went. Volk had a lot of early success, and obviously, the big debate point that everybody has when discussing who rightfully won on Twitter, not even though I don't think it's that big of a controversy. Obviously, the low MMA's new favorite fad, the low calf kick, was landing all night for Volkanovski, and that's where he really got in a rhythm early. But people could take the attitude that you kind of just laid out going into this fight in regards to Holloway, based off of obviously his track record and prolonged era as a champion, on top of the fact that the fight did begin to kind of turn Max's way. Now, I think a little too late, obviously, being that I scored it for Volk. It was either 49-46 or 48-47. But I think part of the reason why people could be potentially thinking, fluke talk, is because of the fact that Max potentially throughout, you said you went back and watched this fight. I watched it about 6 or 7 days ago. You see that kind of corner begin to be turned by Max, albeit it was too late for him to make up that ground. Maybe that could be another potential factor into it.
Yeah, it's something I said on the breakdown show, the return of the Sherdog roundtable. I talked about the urgency that Max Holloway has to fight with urgency. And that's one thing people said, he gave away the first 3 rounds. He wasn't urgent. Then when he picked up the pressure, 4 or 5, he won. Of the 3 judges, 2 out of 3 scored at 48-47, given the last 2 rounds to Max Holloway. The third judge had it 50-45. As far as the fight not being that close, I just went to MMA Decisions to see every single MMA media member who scored the fight gave the fight for Volkanovski. MMA Mania had it 50-45 for Volkanovski. Rob Tainer went 49-45. There was a slew of
49-45.
Yeah, they gave him must be a 10-8 round in this. I got to think about that one. Yeah, I don't know. That must have been.
I just think that's an incorrect.
Yeah, I don't know.
Thing.
I don't know. It took me a while to think how we got that score. Yeah, it must have been a 10-8 round in there. Yeah, it must be because 49-46 probably gave a 10-8 round for Volkanovski. A bunch of 49-46s, and then there's a handful of 48-47s, which I am actually one of them. I scored at 48-47. I gave Volkanovski the first 2 rounds. I gave Holloway the last 2. I rewatched it. Holloway wins the 5th round. The 4th round's close. So let's move on from that. Let me ask this question. So we talked about Volkanovski and his chance to prove himself like Rose Namajunas. But that said, I still believe all the pressure's on Max Holloway because he lands in that no man's land, which for a long time Joseph Benavidez was in that position when Demetrius Johnson was a champ. Joanna Jędrzejczyk fell in that position when Rose Namajunas was a champ. John Fitch, going back, John Fitch when he lost to George St. Pierre, Tito Ortiz when he lost to Chuck Liddell, like all these guys, if you lose to the champion twice, you have to need someone else. But remember, if he loses, that would be 3 losses out of his last 4, including the fight when he went up and lost to Dustin Poirier. So now he's already gone up to weight class and lost to, it was a fantastic fight, unbelievable fight. Some people would argue that he won. I didn't. I scored it for Poirier, but an incredible fight. So, but he's in that really nose land. You got a super deep division at 145. You got losses there. Super deep division at 155. You lost a lot of shine because you lost 3 out of 4. Like, you're way behind. I mean, you think about 155. You got Conor. You got obviously Gaethje who's in the position. Dustin Poirier's in the position. You got a bunch of other guys. It really puts him in the back. So all the pressure is on Max Holloway. Do you agree with me or no?
100%. And it is that incredibly unenviable position that nobody wants to be in, let alone if they had ever held a world title before or had they just circumstantially lost to the champion sitting twice circumstantially. That's a position that's purgatory. Like, that's bottom. It does not matter. It does not matter. For example, think about how long was Wonder Boy after the draw and the loss? A draw and a loss.
Yeah.
Like,
that's
not even 2 losses.
Yeah, that's another good point. Yep. Yeah.
But how long was Wonder Boy either number 1 or number? I get it, rankings, whatever. But still, like, how long was Wonder Boy either number 1 or number 2?
Yeah. And that was a draw. Yeah, that was a draw and a loss.
Yes.
In both fights, people argued he won both of them. Like, he actually could have won those. Like, people argue that he should have got his hand raised in those. That's a good point. A lot
of people argue Triple G beat Canelo twice, including myself. You think he's ever going to get Canelo to fight him again? Absolutely not. Like, that's the situation you want to avoid. Like, that, absolutely, especially if said guy is holding the belt. Because, and again, that's why I notioned at the beginning that if it does go badly for Holloway here, I don't see another way. What's the point of continuing to cut down to 145 if there is no immediate path to a title? What's the point?
No, I know. He might have to be in that tweaker one where he's taking fights in both divisions, kind of whatever's the sexiest matchup. If he loses, I mean, if he wins, everything's great in the world again. It's the blessed era again. We'd have to probably do a trilogy fight sooner rather than later. I hope they don't. I really hope if Holloway wins, they don't run back a trilogy immediately. I don't think they'll do. Nah, there's a lot of guys. I don't think they'll do that. But there's a lot of things I didn't think they would do, and one thing I didn't think they would do is book a guy who has lost not one, but lost his last 2 fights. He's getting a title fight. I mean, this guy is, in my opinion, the greatest featherweight of all time, but he's not fighting for the featherweight title. He's fighting for the vacant bantamweight title, despite being 0-1 in the division, losing his last fight to Marlon Moraes. So, all right, so let me think. There's a couple questions I want to ask you. First of all, we just talked about Max Holloway. Should he got this? Does he deserve this one? Do you think Jose? So let me. Jose Aldo is fighting Peter Yan for the vacant title, given up by Henry Cejudo. Henry Cejudo is retiring. I'm doing that. You can't see this because we're not video, but I'm doing the quotation retiring. Because I don't believe any MMA retirements until he probably returns in a year from now. Nobody seems to have an issue with Peter Yan getting the shot, but the person opposite of him, Jose Aldo, seems like a lot of people have an issue with. Do you have an issue with Jose Aldo fighting for the title?
An issue, I believe, is a little bit of a strong sentiment. I think that I would have gone a different route. And, you talk about his last fight. Doesn't it seem like the consensus, or at least as it seems on social media, not only think Aldo won the fight, but think Aldo got royally screwed? I think it was super close. And, as a matter of fact.
I'm glad I'm asking you that because.
I'm staring right at MMA decisions right now, and I see one name of
That's
I
right,
see one
and I
name that
stand by
makes
it.
up one half of our Skype call that scored it for Marlon Moraes.
I did score from. I thought he won the first round. I thought he stole the third round at the end.
I thought it was very close. I almost scored it for Moraes, but there's that one round. I can't remember. Did you say it was the third? I haven't watched that fight back since
he
it actually happened.
So the first half of the round, Jose Aldo. So the whole second round is all Jose Aldo. In the beginning of the third round, and then Marlon Moraes turns it up at the end, and I thought he stole it. But if you go to MMA decision, I mean, it's split right down the middle.
9-9.
9-9.
Yep. 29-28 across the board on both sides.
So convince me that Jose Aldo wins. I'll change my opinion, and then we could say that he got screwed, because then it'd be the majority for Jose Aldo.
But no one got screwed
no.
in a sense. We have that conversation all the time.
Screwed would have been if all 18 people gave him for Jose Aldo. Then you could say he got screwed. But if even in situations where it's like you have 18 people score and it's 14-4, that's not a screw job.
No, not at all.
And I 18-1. All right, maybe you got one guy, Drake throwing out one of his crazy scorecards, but
yes, sir. Hey, he's with you on this one, 29-28 Moraes. Or at
so
least
you don't remember how you scored it?
I remember scoring it for Aldo.
Okay, so you scored it for. All right, so let me tell you my issue.
But I thought it was close.
Let me tell you my issue. I have no issue with Pretty getting the title shot, but I'll give you 2 words why I have an issue with Jose Aldo getting the title shot. This is my 2 words. Aljamain Sterling.
You make a good point.
There you go.
Just with those
Aljamain
words
Sterling
alone.
deserves a bit more. I'm sorry. He deserves it more. He's got a good winning streak. Or I'll throw another 2 words at you. Marlon Moraes. How about the guy who beat him?
I think it was lazy on the UFC's part in a sense. When they went out and Dana was kind of fumbled the bag. My fault. Hey, ESPN, who I just so happen to be talking to right now where everyone can hear me. People be mad at me if I said this, but Aldo and Jan are in the plans right now. This was before Sandhagen was supposed to fight Sterling, so I'm getting that lazily feel that no matter how good Sterling was going to look, it was always going to be, yeah, well, I mean, we kind of already went on ESPN, and I gave the new. My bad. Sorry. I don't really know what is the particular deal with the UFC's insistence to have Aldo as the blue corner side in this fight. At the end of the day, I love the fight. I love the matchup for obvious reasons.
It's
It's
intriguing.
You don't have to be like a rocket scientist and watch MMA to like the fight. But yeah, I mean, Sterling deserves to be in the blue corner in this fight. Or, I mean, if you go by the rankings, he'd be in the red corner. He's ranked higher than Petr Yan.
Yeah. Petr Yan, I believe, is a pretty sizable favorite. I don't have the odds in front of me. I'm pulling up right now. He's a pretty sizable. He is
minus 235.
Well, it's actually not as big as I thought it'd be. I actually thought it'd be closer to the 300. So let me ask you this question: say Jose Aldo does win, he becomes a two-weight champion. A 2-time featherweight champion. We both said we believe he's the greatest featherweight champion. What does winning the bantamweight title? What would that do for his legacy?
Man, that
would have to put him in top 5 now.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking.
If he's not there already, he might be there already.
We're talking about the damn near cusp of immortalization in the sport. Obviously, with a little bit of room to be given to those that you would maybe even put higher on that ledger. But I'm talking like the elite of the elite in the sports history, the John Jones and the Khabibs of the world. However, if you are kind of sculpting that Mount Rushmore with those 2 guys in mind, shit, dude. 2-time champion at 145, especially with how good and how much 145 has progressed since Aldo, came in from the WEC. And with him to go down to a division that you could even make a case, obviously, skip the line. But if you want to have those kind of arguments with people where they're like, oh, he skipped the line. Well, hey, man, you want to have a de facto shut people up type of argument on whether or not he can contend in this weight class. He would obviously have the belt if he wins in this weight class on Saturday. Put a guy like Petr Yan in front of him and have anybody that watches MMA tell me that he can't consistently compete, obviously, at 135. I mean, Petr Yan, maybe outside of, as we've mentioned, Aljamain Sterling, is just about the damnedest test to put in front of a guy that's trying to accomplish this. So I think credit would have to be given where it's due. Yeah, I mean, Aldo, what a resume.
let me say this. So you just talked about, like, if he can beat Petr Yan, what does that say about him, his skill set right now? Obviously, that'd be amazing, but just having half of MMA decisions think you beat Marlon Moraes, who just fought for the title, who was winning the title fight before he lost it. I think that says a lot, especially, I mean, people will throw out the name saying, oh, Jose Aldo's only 33, like he's still young. No, he's an old 33, let's be honest. He's been through wars. I mean, think about those Chad Mendez fight, the knockout for Conor, even the Edgar fights were close, back and forth, Max Holloway. I mean, he's got some miles on him.
Absolutely.
What Alex Volkanovski did to him. I mean, there's a lot to do with that. So let me
he didn't lose for 10 years until Conor clipped him.
Yeah, So
a decade.
When I think about the all-time rankings, people ask me the all-time rankings. I feel this way: the top 2 spots are locked up, in my opinion. I don't think Jose Aldo could reach that. To me, the top 2 spots are locked up. I have it John Jones with George St. Pierre right behind him. You might have the other way around. However you want. Those are the top 2 spots. Those spots are locked up. But number 3 is open. And he gets the bantamweight title. He might be my number 3. You know, Daniel Cormier is in there. Anderson Silva's in there. Demetrius Johnson's
Where's
in
Habib?
there. Habib's telling me I think he needs a little bit longer longevity.
I agree with you, but I think he's close.
He's got that crazy record. He doesn't have the long list of title fights. He doesn't have the long list of names on his record, but obviously the undefeated streak is crazy impressive. And in 1-2 more years of dominance, he might be number 3. He might be higher. But
I agree.
To me, he's not there yet. He's the guy that's creeping himself up the wrist. Let's get this before I get you out of here. We talked about, you said that you like the entire card. Give me what's one fight on the undercard, not one fight, not a title fight that you're most excited about, or whatever. One fight you want to talk about right now that's not one of the 3 title fights that we talked about.
You know, the one that people would peg, especially if you go below the main card, obviously for those that consider themselves film junkies, you can't sit down and have a little bit of a powwow for a Yuri Prochazka film session and not come away like, oh, wow. Very happy to see him in the UFC. However, I'm going to go to a different guy that'll be making his UFC debut this week, a guy I've had my eye on for a very long time, and rightfully so, from a promotion that has spit out a bunch of guys that are now fighting and winning in the UFC. You know, Nate Landwehr was the M1 Global Featherweight champion this time last year. Up a weight class in M1, the champion was Roman Bogatov. He comes in at 10-0. He'll be making his UFC debut. And what does that say about a guy? I don't even have to throw out his priors and obviously undefeated. And to win an M1 title, you know, is a pretty serious distinction. But what does it say about a guy to be booked in your UFC debut against a guy who is as criminally underrated at 155 like Leonardo Santos is, and a guy that is getting so much better?
But when you fight
6-0-1?
Yeah, when you fight once every 2.5 years, that'll do that right to you. And you're 40 years old too. He's 40 years old.
Yeah, that's something I always forget about.
Yeah, he's 40. Yeah, it's one of those ones where it's a hard pick because you go, man, he looks so good, but good. He's not a heavyweight at 40. You know what I mean? He's a lightweight 40. Those lower weight classes not very forgiving. You know, the bottom drops out quick. I'm going to give you a freebie. I'm not doing predictions on this show because obviously I did the round table and all my picks out there. I want people to listen to the round table. I'll give you one freebie. I picked Santos. I'm taking Santos. I'm taking it by submission. I think he's going to submit Bogatov. But that's the fight you're really looking at. That's the fight you're really looking at.
That's the one that I've got my eyes on for sure. I like, as far as debutantes are concerned, I also really like Zumagulov as well.
He's got a tough matchup. He's got another tough matchup.
I know. Weirdly enough, too, did the Maxim Grishin thing kind of come out of left field?
Yeah, I know. Especially at heavyweight.
That was very strange.
especially at heavyweight. And
I thought that was
the
odd.
PFL hasn't, after Felipe Lens, the PFL has not had a really good run in the UFC so far, as Felipe Lens has lost twice. I'm going to get you out of here. Before I do, I'm going to put you on the spot. Jose Aldo Jr., Peter Yan, who wins and how?
I'm going to go ahead and give it to Jan. I think it's going to be competitive early. I do think, though, that the pace and pressure that Jan will put on will eventually, as the rounds go on, eventually take a toll. I think Jan does get him out of there. And quickly, I do also think one thing that people are glancing over in this fight, these two guys are pretty familiar with each other. I don't know if it was so much Aldo going to Thailand to train with Jan or vice versa, but they've trained together a considerable amount of time. I think these guys know each other pretty well, and I think that is only going to benefit the guy that I think right now is younger, faster, potentially at 135 a more natural weight class. I think that it would be spectacular to see Aldo do it, and obviously, as we've indicated, the credit will be given to him where it's due if he does, but I'm going to have to go with Jan. I think he stops it late.
Yep, so that would be another Russian champion. Co-main event, does Alec Volkanovski beat Max Holloway again, or is it back to the blessed era?
I think the blessed era, for at least right now at 145, is going to come to a definitive close. But, man, as you can tell with the pauses in my sentences, I'm not fully in on that yet. Like, that is where I'm strongly leaning, but I still have, like, that little voice in the back of my head that is telling me to reconsider and think about it a little bit longer. My pick now, though, is it is Volkanovski, but I think this is the hardest pick for me to make, maybe even more potentially than the main event on this card. I think I think
I totally
it could go
agree.
either way.
Of the three title fights, that's the one I had the hardest time picking. It's the one from an X's and O's standpoint that I'm most excited from X's and O's standpoint. And main event, you've kind of already tipped your cap a little bit. This sounds like you're going with Usman. Am I correct?
Yeah, I think he's, like we said earlier, I think the grapple heavy approach is going to be where he leans and should, and rightfully so. I think round 3 TKO ground and pound sounds about right, but man, will this sport be turned on its head if we are wrong?
Yeah, absolutely right. I obviously we don't root. Me and you don't root. We're two media members. We don't root for. We might root for our picks. Like if I pick someone, I want to be right. So I'm not necessarily rooting for the fighter. I'm rooting for myself.
Right. Absolutely.
But I know the UFC should be rooting for Jorge Masvidal. Now, if Kamaru Usman wins, his stock will obviously rise, beating a guy like Jorge Masvidal. But if Jorge Masvidal wins on Saturday, we might be entering a Conor-like level. It'll definitely be his world, and we'll just be living in it. It'll be incredible. Very smart of them to locking up for a long time. But yeah, it'd be very interesting. I kind of want that to happen. I already gave my pick on the round table, but I kind of want it to happen just to see that, to see that era.
Exactly.
But
just to see like what would come of it, because that's kind of an unknown realm.
Yeah, it'd be pretty incredible. Guys, he's Davidson Baker. He's a writer for the MMA Power Hour and Fanside. Davidson, tell them where they can find you.
Fansided is where my writings will be this particular weekend. At Dave Bake MMA is where you can find me on Twitter. I don't really be anywhere else on social media. That's where you can pretty much find me. Bottom Line Podcast as well.
Yeah, tell them about your podcast, where they can find your podcast.
So my podcast, you can find it everywhere. We do live tapings on my social media. I've been working with a guy recently. We break down the fight cards every single Thursday. Guy by the name of AJ Shulo from MMA Oddsbreaker. Let me just say this. I mean, if you're looking for just a half hour to an hour type thing to help you get a feel for what guys that are in the know, let alone my man AJ, who is a hardcore real-time betting handicapper who really breaks this stuff down. If you want to hear all those types of thoughts from a mind that is not only centralized around MMA but obsessed with the finer details of it, you're going to have to check that out on Thursdays. I do that. It's the Bottom Line Podcast with Davidson Baker.
All right, guys, there you have it. He is Davidson Baker. Guys, I'm going to close the show up right now. Me and Davidson just went for an hour. I gave my opinions on the news. Plus, we went through all the card. Make sure you check out all the rest of the material on the Loudmouth MMA Podcast Network. We had the Breakdown Show. We have the Shooting the Shit Show. Obviously, we have the Sherdog Roundtable. Make sure you check all those things out. I just want to close the show up with saying one more thing. I said it in the 5 news stories, but I want to say while I have Davidson still here, I know I speak for everybody at Loudmouth. I speak for everyone at Sherdog. I know I speak for Davidson. We want to just mention once again our condolences to Khabib Nurmagomedov and his family in the death of his father, Abdulmanap. I hope I said that. I said it the first time. I believe I said that correctly. But most condolences to him and his entire family. Guys, enjoy the fights. Make sure you check out the recap. I am actually sitting this one out. Unfortunately, I can't do the recap. So filling in for me is the great Jay Petrie from Sherdog. He'll be with Ben. They'll be recapping all the actions from UFC 251. So make sure you check that. And make sure you subscribe, like, do all that stuff. Share your friends. Tell everybody about the partnership with Loudmouth MMA and Sherdog. See you next week.